Masters. We have changed our format a bit this year, so we're really focusing on making this an experience where we can hone our storytelling and humor skills. And you'll hear a bit more about that from Emmy in a minute as Toastmaster. I have a little bit of club business to conduct, so I'll take 2 minutes to do that. We received an application from Cheryl Marks, one of our members, has made a motion to accept her application for membership. And another member has seconded it. So I will ask if there is any discussion about adding Cheryl.
Should I put Cheryl in the waiting room?
No, I don't think we need to put Cheryl in a meeting room.
Okay.
Wait till you hear what I have to say.
We'll put you on mute. That's what we'll do.
I say, let her in.
Let her in. So I would like, by a raise of hands from members who accept Cheryl's membership into Lab Storymasters. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, welcome Cheryl, yay!
Thank you.
Watch this now. Can't see.
So you know something? This is something new in the world of Zoom. I said, raise your hand, and it raised my hand.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
All right. So I am pleased about tonight's meeting. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous. But I know we're going to be well guided by our very experienced and very affable Toastmaster, Emmy Bartholomew. Welcome, Emmy.
Well, thank you. Affable. Yeah, that's me. All righty. Welcome, everybody. And we're going to get started. But first, I think we need to get a little bit of other business done. So let's see. Timer is Kyle Hall today. And Kyle is going to show us his backgrounds to make sure that we...
Oh, you want to see my timing flags, do you? Oh, well, all right then. I think that can be arranged. That's my green.
Green.
That's my yellow. That's my red.
All right. We've got it. All right. All right.
And I'm assuming all the speakers are 5 to 7 minutes unless you tell me otherwise. Except for Lee, which is 8 to 12.
8 to 12. Okay. I think we're good. We do not have a grammarian, but I noticed that our agenda has a really lovely assignment for us all, which is to have everyone watch for make grammatical observations. So during our meeting, if you see anything that you would like to make a comment about, make a note of it so that you can contribute to our experience tonight. All righty. First of all, last meeting, we had some assignments that we were supposed to work on. So the assignment was to start a story journal. How many of you started a story journal? Ah, look at that. I already had one, and I have 13 stories in it. And let's see, I'm using the story collection that is on the international website. Now, you don't have to do that. You can have a Excel spreadsheet. You can have just a plain old, whoops, there, notebook. It doesn't matter. I kind of like the collection that they have. Makes it really easy to categorize them and find them. So, all right, then the next part of the assignment was to make a list of the rooms in the house you lived in growing up. And then you were supposed to list 10 people you grew up with and a story about each one. Well, I'll start by saying that my family moved so much, it was more like name the 10 houses that you lived in. I don't remember any of them very well. I could name 1 or 2 rooms in each house, but not the whole house. So I just thought, oh, 10 houses. Then naming 10 of the people that you grew up with. That was pretty simple for me. So I'd like to hear your experience. Was it easy for you? Did you find stories that you'd forgotten? How did that go for you? Cynthia?
It went okay. There's a lot of blanks on my sheet. Like I didn't find a story for each one, but I I came up with several stories for like I had a debate teacher named Mr. Webster, and I thought of 4 or 5 instances with Mr. Webster. But yet my sister Trisha, who I grew up with, not so much. She wasn't funny at all.
Okay, all right. What about you, Mary? How was your experience with this?
I had an easy time doing the rooms. And because I had actually a very small house, and part of the whole funniness of it is I have 9 siblings, and we often had cousins living with us, and it was an 8-room house. So it was, yeah, it was crazy, just crazy in and of itself. The people, I couldn't select, like, again, my siblings by themselves, I could pick, that's almost 10 people. So I did groups, like the drunken uncles, the siblings, the nuns, rather than, so the collective, I seem to have a very blurry memory and not very good at individuals. So that's how it went for me, but fun to do.
Oh, Shirley, were you here last week? Last time.
Cheryl was here last time.
Did you see me?
Yes.
I heard about it. I don't know if I think I might have heard it in the last meeting, but Cynthia reminded me also. I didn't get very far on it, but I did put the rooms in, and I've got the first room. It's got a first idea and the humor idea of it, and I got in a couple of people. A few. I think I had 5 or 6 people written down on the people I grew up with. So I have got one out there. One room, done. And I'm sure I'll get some more. And this also will tie in with my book, because a lot of
a
lot of what I'm going to come up with, I'm sure is going to be in my book too. So yeah, but I kind of got the idea, and thank you, Kyle, for sending out your example, because that did help me a lot to get it in my head what I needed to do.
Karen.
Thank you, Emmy. I have been out of the country, so haven't been here for the past 2 meetings, but I did see from the emails what the assignment was. So I thought it would be kind of a fun one to do. I have a current list of stories, and I have them categorized by, whether they're humor, whether they're travel, whether they're educational, I've got all different types of things going on. But when I saw this activity of going through the rooms, I thought, well, that's kind of a fun way to think of it as well. So I did that. I went through the rooms and I thought about the people that I grew up with, and it was actually quite easy to come up with stories related in each one between the rooms and with people. So I thought it was a fun way to do it. And what I did was I was able to then take this information and add it in to the list that I currently have. And it just gives it another layer and gives it another way of looking at the stories or the ideas. When people say, oh gosh, I don't have any idea what to talk about for a speech or something like that, I love having this document, because then I can go in and I have all of my, oh, that's right, I could talk about this, I could do this, and all of a sudden your mind just starts going and it opens up the fog and you have ideas. So I thought it was a fun activity to do, and it was very easy to incorporate it into my current strategies. So thank you for letting me play even though I wasn't here.
All right. Lee, we are going to go ahead and get started on your section because it's time. So sorry you won't be able to share your story collection with us, but I'm sure you have one. Okay. So today's meeting, we will be looking at the story, actually creating stories and some of the elements that go into storytelling. And that is going to be led by our educational speaker tonight, who has been in Toastmasters for 32 years this month. Woo! He is a professional storyteller belonging to the Storytellers Association of California, specifically with a guild that is located in Los Angeles called the Storymasters. He speaks at or MCs many of the SAC events, Storyteller Association of California events, and also Artists Standing Strong Together events. He has the opening poem in the 2022 book titled The Storytelling Bistro, available on Amazon and fine bookstores near you. Tonight, he will deliver an interactive storytelling presentation that will focus on the following: scene with descriptive language that appeals to the senses, an illusion, and then characters, conflict. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to distinguished Toastmaster, Lee Amatangelo. Lee.
Knock, knock. Yeah, Dad? Son, why are you watching television on this beautiful summer day? You should be outside with your friends, running around, playing sports, having adventure. Yeah, Dad, but it's comfortable in here. Son, unless you get out of your comfort zone every day, you're not truly living. Outside that front door is a world of excitement, a world of opportunity, a world that is just the push of a button away. What did that mean? And as my father left the room, he bent down and pushed the power button on the television set. As I watched the screen fade to black, and knowing my father, that was not a suggestion, that was a directive. I had but one option: to go outside. As I stepped onto the front porch, I was immediately hit by the strong, sweet scent of honeysuckle lingering in the air, so thick you can almost taste it. As I stepped barefoot on the morning lawn, the cool blades of grass tickled the soles of my feet while the warmth of the sun danced upon my cheeks. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the cute girl from a couple doors down, Veronica Fox, riding on her Barbie pink Schwinn down the center of the street, complete with pink and silver streamers hanging from the handlebars that were flailing and snapping in her self-propelled wind. As surprising as sunshine in Seattle, she stopped, smiled, spoke to me. "Good morning, cutie," as she tore off down the street around the corner and out of sight. I'm pretty sure she said cutie and not cootie, but the point is, the cutest girl in the third grade stopped, smiled, and spoke to me. My daddy was right. It was exciting outside my comfort zone. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and storytellers from around the world, that's the opening story of my district-winning speech back in 2014. And as a story, you can see it has an opening, a body, and a conclusion. And we will use this story. So I want you all to go off of mute. I'm going to make this really interactive. Let's pretend that it's 4 years ago, and we're actually sitting in a Toastmaster meeting, and we're seeing each other live, and we're feeling each other's heat and presence, and we're shaking each other's physical hand. Let's come off mute and let's have a discussion. How many settings were in that story?
At least two.
Two.
Or three. So the first setting is me and Dad in the family room. The second scene of that story is me stepping out on the front porch. And then the third scene would be the interaction with Veronica Fox, the cutest girl in the third grade. Okay, so those are our scenes. How do we bring these scenes to life? So in the first scene, we have my father and I, and we're having dialogue. I didn't start the scene by narrating what was going to happen. Think about when you watch your favorite sitcoms on television. There's no one in the corner of the television screen telling you what the story is. We learn the story of the Seinfeld episode because of the dialogue between the characters. So that's what we do as speakers, except for our job's a little harder, isn't it? Because we're playing all the characters in the scene. So how do we bring those characters to life? We have different mannerisms. When I spoke to my dad, I looked up this way, and when Dad looked at me, he looked down this way and was kind of stern. My voice was childlike. His voice was deeper and more authoritative. So we have to stay committed to our characters. It can just be a slight nuance. I've heard women storytellers, and they're talking about their father, and they just go into a slightly deeper voice. And every time they do that slightly deeper voice, we realize that's Dad speaking. It doesn't have to be overt, but the more you can play with your voice, the more pronounced your characters will be. So we have voice and we have mannerisms that bring those characters to life. Now, what was the conflict in that first opening scene?
You didn't want to go outside.
I didn't want to go outside. I wanted to stay in my comfort zone on the warm couch underneath my comforter. You saw me pull the comforter up toward my face. And my dad wants me to go outside and experience the exciting, the opportunistic, and the adventuresome world. And as the case usually is for us when we're little children, the authoritative parent always wins those conversations. So I was forced to go outside. Now let's go into the second scene. I open the door, and what am I immediately hit with?
Honeysuckle.
The strong, sweet scent of honeysuckle. And then what else? What was the next sense that I experienced? So thick you can almost
Sun. Oh, taste it.
taste it. So we have smell and we have taste. And then I stepped onto the morning lawn, and what happened? Did
Pickle.
I feel something? I felt the cool blades of grass on the soles of my feet, and I felt the warm sun dancing on my cheek. So I had touch. And then what was the next sense that I was experiencing? Out of the corner of my eye, the cute girl from third grade, a couple doors down on her what color bike?
Pink.
Barbie pink. And what kind of bike was it? We all had one.
Twin.
Schwinn, the old Schwinn bicycle. And when I did that speech at the district stage, a bunch of people came up to me afterwards, and some lady about my age said, I had that Barbie pink bike with the banana seat and the high roll bar. And I said, I had all that in my speech, but when I had to cut out time, those little details had to go. But it was so cool that she was able to see the scene I was creating, and it took us back to the 60s. And that is called illusion. That's where the speaker doesn't have to use words, but we allude to something and the audience fills in all the other blanks for us. As a competitive speaker, that's one of the greatest tips that we can do, one of the great rhetorical devices, because we don't have to use the words. We let the experiential knowledge of our audience fill in the blanks. So we had the sight, and then what was the last sense that I had in that scene on the porch and on the grass? I heard her say, hi, good morning, cutie. Okay, so I brought in all 5 senses in that small little scene on the porch. And then she tore around the corner. And then we come to the end of the story. And what was the lesson learned?
It is exciting out there.
It is exciting outside my comfort zone. So I did a play on words there of going outside and also outside my comfort zone. A small snippet. The 2004 world champion of public speaking, Randy Harvey, calls those vignettes. He has several vignettes in his world championship speech. A small story with an opening, a body, and a conclusion. And in his speech he does in 2004, he tells us 7 stories in 6 minutes and 50 seconds, and his shortest story is 34 seconds, if you can believe it. And it is the most powerful of all the stories. It has the power line that when he's invited all around the world, women come up to him all the time and they say, I had my son, my high school son or my 20-something son watch your speech just so they can hear that line. Real men love for a lifetime, not just a moment. What a powerful line in a very short story. It can be done. Now, I would never try to mentor somebody and say, hey, let's do 7 speeches in your competitive speech here, but he is such a masterful storyteller. We brought him into my district before, and my good friend Omar Rivas knew how much I loved Randy Harvey. He said, how would you like to have host a dinner for him? Let's keep it intimate. We had 30 people. I got to interface with him on email. When he got there, I got to talk to him. I sat at his table. It was one of the best nights of my life to actually sit with my idol and just hear how he thought. But he comes from a family of storytellers, and it was just beautiful. Okay, so we have those stories there. We have setting, we have the scene. I recommend this. When you start to speak to an audience, let there be a pause of silence. You may have noticed I didn't speak right after Emmy introduced me. Let a pause of silence fall over the audience, almost an uncomfortable silence. Did he forget his lines? And then you pound them with that opening statement. Don't fumble and say, oh, thank you, Madam Toastmaster. I wasn't feeling well today. I have a little bit of sore throat. And you go through all this minutia that doesn't mean anything. It detracts. Start with your opening line. And what I like to do is just start creating a scene, because our audience is much smarter than we think they are. They will just start paying attention right away. What's he talking about? Knock, knock. And then Dad's speaking and I'm speaking, and they just start trying to piece it together. Keep the word simple. Keep the scene simple. Have dialogue. Make sure they understand who the different characters are, different voices, different mannerisms. And you just keep it very simple, but it's powerful. Okay. The other way to tell a story is to narrate. And that's what we see when a lot of people first come to Toastmasters. They narrate, they do their icebreaker, and they tell us, this is what I did then, and here's how much I weighed, and here's how tall I was, and here's the grades I got, and here's the subjects I liked, and here's why I went to school. And it's all fact and figure, dates and data, and it's all narrated, and pretty much it's pretty boring, wouldn't you agree? But a scene with dialogue and characters is much more exciting. And there's a third way we should do a story. I didn't do it in this particular scene, but at some point you tap the audience. Have you ever had one of the cute little kids in your school show an interest in you? Now all of a sudden they start thinking about being a childhood again, using illusion. And it takes them right into the scene. So that's another way. It's called tap and transport. We learned that from the 1999 world champion of public speaking, Craig Valentine. So there's narration, try to steer clear from that. Do dialogue with scenes to tell your story. Do dialogues with scene and tap and transport the audience into the scene. Use very descriptive language. Use very descriptive language. When I was doing the senses, I think I smelt the honeysuckle, right? I use very precise words that honeysuckle sounds very sweet, even if you've never smelt honeysuckle before. Excuse, right? And then again, trying to do a lot of illusion where you bring the audience back when they were younger and they start experiencing the scene for one, but they also fill in a lot of the details, remembering back when. And the lesson learned, right? So in a great story, we have our opening. There should always be a conflict. And if there's going to be a conflict, there's going to be a resolution. The resolution to the conflict between my father and I was for me to go outside. But by the end of the story, there is a lesson learned. And the lesson I learned was, I'm so glad Dad pushed me out of my comfort zone, pushed me to go outside, because I learned, had I not gone outside at that moment, that the cute girl in 3rd grade liked me, smiled and spoke to me. I never thought in a million years she would do that. So the lesson learned was, it was exciting outside and outside my comfort zone. So when you want to write your stories, I spend most of my time writing my competitive speech doing that one technique we learned in our CC manual. Get to the point. Right. When you're writing your stories, don't try to analyze, write it as much as you like. Oh, I didn't like the way I wrote that. Don't erase. Just start writing again a different way. Keep everything written. Go back and read. put it aside for a while, go back and write some more, and then you come down and you're going to rip out over 50% of what you've written and try to make every word and every sentence mean something. When I write my stories now, I write them by sentence. And in the right margin, I put what is the value of this sentence. It has allusion, it has alliteration, it has simile, it's humor. And so I'm giving a rhetorical value to each one of my sentences. So when my speech is 8 minutes long and I got to get it down closer to 6.5 to 7, I got to start ripping out stuff. I look at my right margin, I go, well, this is just kind of story development. I like keeping my humor in. I like keeping the rhetorical devices in. And some of my lines, I call them polyrhetoric. It's a simile with alliteration, or it's a simile with humor. It's got multiple rhetorical devices, and rhetorical devices stimulate the brain. I keep those in my stories. So today, we talked about having the setting or the scene. We talked about characters, and we bring them to life how? What 2 ways?
Dialogue.
Voice, dialogue, yes. And what else? Mannerisms.
And yeah.
Voice and mannerism. Today, I talked about the senses, how powerful those are to have the audience actually sense the scene. And guess what sense the audience likes to have the most? I think Kyle knows this one. Yep, the sense of smell. The sense of smell is the one they seem to gravitate more than most and love to have that. So bring in that sense of smell. Use very descriptive language. Use allusion. And allusion does what for us? We don't have to use as many words. The audience fills in the blanks, but it also takes them back to a time when you want to have a chronological flow to your speech. And then every good story better have what? It's the why, the lesson learned. And I will stop right there and give this back to our virtual Toastmaster of the day, Emmy Bartholomew.
Okay, Lee. Wonderful job. I got a lot out of that one. I have a whole page full of notes. So thank you very much.
On that note, I will send out a link to a PowerPoint that has a lot of details in it about storytelling.
Well,
These are just some of them. So I'll put that at the link at the end of the meeting.
Okay. So now we get to move into our speeches. We have what we are calling a practice speaker. Our first one will be Cynthia. And what she's going to be doing is practicing using those elements in her speech. Not the ones we learned this week, but last month. Anyway, for Cynthia, she is exploring her roles and responsibilities, being a member of the sandwich generation. I'm looking forward to finding out what the sandwich generation is. So here she is with her speech entitled The Sandwich Generation. Cynthia.
My mother is feisty. I waffle between wanting to grow up and be just like her and wanting to strangle her sometimes. We often clash. For example, the doctor sent a note saying that it was time for her physical. She didn't want to go. She said it's a waste of $130. Plus, he just wants to see me naked. Now, I did not laugh or roll my eyes, but I'm pretty sure that the doctor does not want to see my 80-year-old mother naked. On the day of her appointment, she flat out refused to go. Instead, her friend came over and the two of them socialized over glasses of champagne. Life with an aging parent is never dull. Mom has a boyfriend. He's now in assisted living because he cannot live alone either. He uses a walker for balance. My mother doesn't use a walker but should. Her balance is equally as shaky. One day I came over to Mom's house and she told me that we had to go get Gary at the assisted living facility and drive him over to his house so he could do a quick repair on a riding lawnmower that his daughter broke. Mind you, this was no quick trip. It was at least 45 minutes to Shady Palms, another 30 minutes to Gary's house, plus the time to look at the lawnmower and repeat the process. Getting the car loaded was an adventure. I had to settle my mom, assist Gary with folding up the walker, and load 2 wobbly adults into the car. The walker and I had a disagreement about whether or not it was going to fold up nicely and get into the car. Eventually, I won. Once we got there, Gary hops out of the car and leaves his walker in the dust. He's 6'2" and weighs more than I, and if he falls, I can't help him. My mom, seeing this, also takes off after him. I'm left with the choice, do I assist Gary or do I help my mom? I didn't think much about it. Mom won. And I latched onto her arm and we trailed behind Gary to look at the mower. Now, I'm not a mechanic. And truth be told, I can't tell you what he did to attempt to fix the mower. But at one point, he asked my mom to put her foot on the gas pedal. What? WTF? No way in hell is she going to do that. So I quickly stepped up and put my foot on the pedal for him. It didn't take too long to determine that, yes, Chrissy had burned the motor out of the lawnmower, which, by the way, she had told him she had done so in the first place. Ay, 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 parent. Children are no better. My adult children have all kinds of unsolicited advice about how I should deal with my mother. My favorite involved my daughter, who was at a dinner eating pizza with my mom and Gary and I, and we were talking about Gary living in Shady Palms. Tia had the nerve to tell me that when my time came for caregiving, she and my son had already talked about it. She was going to bundle me up and I was going to go live with her under her roof and her rules. The hell I am, I shouted. I could feel my blood pressure rising at the mere thought of it. Suddenly, I had empathy for my mother. It is tough. Aging is not for sissies. It is tough getting old. She can no longer drive. One of my other sisters pays the bills, and recently my sister Debbie just moved in to her house to help temporarily take care of her. Yes, my mom is feisty, and one day I'm going to be just like her. I can feel it in my bones.
Thank you, Cynthia. I could relate. Definitely. All righty. Oh, Kyle, do we give people a minute to send feedback in this club or not? I can't remember.
Not
No.
discussed it, so I would say let's not tonight.
Okay. All righty. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our second speaker. Phil Pearson is our second speaker tonight. He's working on his dynamic leadership pathway. Level 1, option 3, which is Intro to Body Language. Yeah, that should be fun. Phil grew up in rural Minnesota as a member of a large family and surrounded by a host of livestock and family pets. Believe it or not, sometimes he and his sister, little sister, disagreed on whose pet was smarter. Here's Phil with his speech, Horses, Dogs, and Cats. Take it away, Phil.
Thank you very much, Madam Toastmaster. My dad was an Army officer for 20 years. When he retired, I was a mere 3 years old. And I didn't have a little sister. I did have 5 older siblings, though. When Dad retired, he and my mom were set on moving back to the home state of Minnesota, where they had experienced in their youth living on a farm. As a result, that's exactly what we did. No sooner than we got to Minnesota and on the farm, my little sister came along. Quite a change in our family dynamic. But it was a good thing until she could talk. Then she didn't ever stop talking. But I learned to enjoy it because it was good fodder for arguments. I thought horses, our family horses, were the smartest animals on the farm. My little sister was convinced that cats were way smarter than a horse. We argued back and forth and back and forth. And I say to you, let me give you some examples of the smart things that each of our family pets did. One of the things we had to have, of course, on a farm is horses and ponies, which fit into my scheme quite nicely. When I was about 5, Dad would put the saddle on our pony, load me on top of the saddle, and walk us around this hedge that was about 30 feet long. Bright, sunshiny day, early summer, beautiful time. Dad had good control of that horse, of that pony. I've heard that names have insight into the character of the animal or the person. This horse's name was Nipper, Nipper. I think that fit him quite well. When we came around the hedge for one more turn, Dad said, Phil, you take the reins. Well, Nipper had a different idea. Nipper thought it was time for me to get off. So instead of taking the turn back towards Dad, Nipper decided to help me off and went running through the forest, galloping at full speed. And just like on the Robin Hood movies, boom, bam, I was smelling the grass. Nipper knew how to get me off and get back to the oats. I think Dad and Nipper had a conversation about proper riding techniques after I was on the ground, but I never saw it. So that's my example of horse sense. Now, my cat, not my cat, actually a cat we had, also had a interesting name. The cat's name was Fatso. I don't know exactly what that meant, but I do believe it had some character reference. Well, Fatso loved to chase bugs and flies and spiders, anything that moved, and eat them. We were in an upper story room that didn't have a screen on it or anything, and Fatso loved to swat at the flies as they buzzed around the window. Well, as Fatso relaxed and was swatting at a fly, the fly went out the window. And Fatso was quite convinced that he could catch that fly. And the next thing he heard was on the ground below. Not the smartest cat, I do say. So I point that out every once in a while as proof that, yes, the horse knows how to get rid of its rider when they want to, and the cat does not know how to stay on solid ground. One pet, though, that we did agree on was dogs. We had a dog named Fritz. Fritz was a cross between a collie and a German Shepherd. Great dog. Fritz was such a good friend to me. In fact, we grew up together. Both Fritz and me and Susan, my sister, we had great games out in the front yard. Usually it involved chasing one of us or both of us. It would involve grabbing a stick and trying to wrestle it away from us. And Fritz was our constant companion. One day my older brother came to visit. Bruce loved to tickle me. I don't know why. And he would wrestle me down and tickle me. And we were outside playing tickle me. Well, I wanted to get away from him. So there was this beautiful oak tree that was leaning just enough that I could run up the trunk into the branches above, which I did because Bruce was chasing me. Fritz decided the game was over and got between me and Bruce and let Bruce know in no uncertain terms, this game has ended. So from that, I thank goodness it was my brother knew the game was ended and we didn't have an altercation in the yard. So we had a lot of fun, all of us, about who the smartest animals were. I'm quite certain in my mind it was the horse, because the horse never fell out of the window. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Phil. I was curious to know whether he actually got turned around when he fell out the window backwards and actually landed on his feet.
That is an unknown.
Unknown.
But he did make that.
All right. Okay. We're ready now for our third speaker. And this will be our perfect member, Mary. Mary has a reputation for taking a wrong turn and getting lost so easily. Her family makes her travel with a tracking device. She's lost herself in books, in conversation, in shopping centers, and in parking lots. Her peak experience in getting lost was on a self-guided tour, walking tour, where she also found her sanity. Welcome, Mary, with her speech, "Don't get lost in nonsense." Mary.
My heart is pounding. My mouth is dry. Palms are clammy. My armpits are soaked down to my elbows. I'm shaking, taking shallow breaths, probably hyperventilating. All the signs that my brain has shut down, because when I walked out of the door of that shopping mall, my car was gone. Convinced it was stolen, I called security. They came around and they asked me a little more details about my car. And then the guard kindly suggested, "Ma'am, are you sure it was this parking garage? We have two, you know, east side and west side." "Nonsense! I know where I parked." Or did I? He kindly offered me a lift, and we drove to the other parking garage where beep, 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 Suddenly my key fob worked exactly as it should, and my car responded. I got in, drove away, not for the last time, embarrassed at my lack of direction. I've experienced this in many places. The worst was my self-guided walking tour. Now, I was all set for a beautiful day. I was on vacation in Kauai with my husband. And in a rare moment of vacation, when we decided to go our separate ways, I had the opportunity to drive to a botanical garden. 50 acres of lush, beautiful flowers, trees, the scent of exotic flora, the birds chattering away in the trees. It was a beautiful setting, and as I descended the tram, the bus driver gave us each a map. Said, "Don't worry, this will be easy. You have about 2 hours to take this tour. Now, you might want to go to the restroom here because there's none along the way. Here's a map. Follow the path. There's a bridge over the hill. When you see the bridge, you'll know that you're there. You're just about at the stop where you want to pick us up. And remember, da 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 da, ya 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 ya." My brain was full. I couldn't hear another word he said. So I had to use my fallback strategies when I'm going for walks. I follow the path. Those maps, they're pretty useless, I have found, because when you're looking at a map and it has a tree, it's not three-dimensional the way it really is. I don't get it. Put it in my pocket and just keep on walking, because plan A is really to follow people in my group. How can I get lost if I'm following others, trusting they have a better sense of direction than me? Well, there was about 12 of us on the tram, and it worked pretty well for the first few minutes. But suddenly they started to splinter off or slow down. So I decided I'd better just follow one couple. And that worked pretty well too, for about another minute. Then I realized it really looked like I was stalking them more than walking with them. I did get lost in my appreciation of the flowers that I was seeing and the trees, because the park had kindly put all these signs out, so I knew what I was seeing. Beautiful, beautiful setting. And I kept along this path and realized maybe it was about time to get turning back, when I looked down and I saw a sign on the ground a little different from all the other signs I had seen. This one said something like, "Caution, wild animals may be in the nearby woods." Wild animals, like this was the setting of Jurassic Park wild animals? I'm thinking to myself. I'm not happy with that. I heard this boom, 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 boom. Certain I heard heavy breathing, the rustling of leaves. I knew there was a wild boar just around the corner. I turned around, and the path I had been on was suddenly so overgrown. How could that bush have grown so high in just a few seconds? And the sound was the pounding of my heart in my ears. I was hopelessly lost. I knew I had to cross a creek because there was a bridge, and a bridge would be over a creek. So I looked for the creek. I found it quickly, as quick as I could. Walk, 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 walk. Kept looking for that bridge. I couldn't find it. I decided I better just plunge through the water. Finally, over the little crest of the hill, I saw the bus stop. And I raced up there, certain that I was going to miss the bus. 45 minutes later, it came along with some of the other people. Was I lost? Yes. What did I really lose that day? A beautiful walk in the woods. I was so worried about being lost. I couldn't even enjoy myself. Probably my only trip to Kauai. Toastmasters, don't get lost in the nonsense of being lost. Lose yourself in the experience. You never know what's going to open up for you when you do that. I hope someday I'll have the technology that maybe I won't have to worry about getting lost. But until then, I'm just enjoying the experience. Madam Toastmaster.
Oh, thank you. I can relate to that because I get lost in shopping malls. Inside the mall. Outside, I'm fine. You know, I can read a map, I can go the right direction, you know, I have spatial, yeah. But as soon as I get in a mall or a big, large building, it's over. I hate going to malls. Thank you for that wonderful story, Mary. Okay, we have on our agenda that it's supposed to be 7:16. It's already 7:21 and we weren't over time. I don't know how that happened. So we're supposed to take a break. And I think we're going to go ahead and take a little short break. All right, we're ready to get into the second part of our meeting. And this is going to be interesting because this will be our first opportunity to practice something that is new to our club, which is to give multiple evaluations, one for story evaluation, one for content and effectiveness, and one for humor. So this will be our first attempt at this, and I'm really looking forward to hearing how that goes. Our general evaluator for this evening is Karen McNamara. So I'm going to turn this over to Karen, and let's get started with the evals.
Thank you, Emmy. Welcome, everyone. What a fun evening so far. I love the way this is designed because we start out with education, then we get practice speaking, and now we are going into the evaluation component. And as Emmy said, we want to learn tonight through what we've been gaining at each meeting. And to do that, each of our speakers will have 3 evaluators, and the evaluation will be focused in a particular area. So for Cynthia, our first speaker, who told us about aging and the challenges there, we will have 3 evaluators. Kyle will be evaluating her for her story. Mary will address the content, and Emmy will focus on humor. So we'll look at our story, our design, and our humor for each person. So I'm going to turn it over first to Kyle, then you can hand it right over to Mary, and then Mary right over to Emmy. I'll turn it now to Kyle Hall.
Thank you, Karen. And looking at Cynthia's story, I will tell you that at times my evaluation, while focusing on story, is going to brush up against humor and content. I don't think we can avoid that. You have a good working speech now, but I think we can make it stronger. The whole point of your speech seems to be trying to show us how your mother is feisty and describing some of your struggles dealing with her. I love the opening story with the doctor, and he just wants to see me naked, and that was funny. I'm wondering if the Gary story, the Gary and the mower story, is the right story for giving a great example of your mother's feistiness, because your mother, other than telling you had to do it, isn't really involved a whole lot. You get her in the car, you get her out of the car, you walk across the field, but other than that, it's mostly Gary and you. So I'm wondering if there isn't another story you could tell about your mother, especially one with dialogue, to give her some more feisty dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
I did want to point out you had a couple of good opportunities in your story for word pictures. One which you did a little bit. You are struggling to get your mother and Gary into the car, and then struggling to get the walker into the car. And you actually kind of started to turn the walker into a third character. It refused to get in the car. And so you could expand that into a full-blown word picture. The other would be the whole experience of walking across the grass and Gary trying to fix the mower and the smell of the burned out mower and things like that. So there's opportunities there to expand your word picture for the story. My two biggest suggestions are this. You talked about your emotions some, and you showed us a little bit. You said, I was so frustrating. Ay. Well, bigger, more. Show us it was so frustrating. You can't be too big. Especially on Zoom. You can expand, you can gesture off screen, so you might have to, keep your gesture small or step back, but don't be afraid to really show us emotion. My other suggestion is at the end, you finished up with you dealing with your daughter and not wanting to do what your daughter was going to say. And you said, I'm going to end up being feisty like my mother. I think you should turn that into a choice. Not, I'm going to end up being feisty. I'm going to be feisty like my mother. And that's the end of my eval, and I will hand it over to Mary Morrison for the content and effectiveness part.
Thanks, Kyle. So many good things I heard, Cynthia. You had this wonderful, clear opening. Then you went into, which included a little story of your mother and the doctor appointment. Then you transitioned to talking about her boyfriend, which when you describe your mother having a boyfriend at 80 and they actually live apart, which is kind of a fun little setup itself. Then you talked about, and you had a great story. I love the story of the lawnmower. Again, full of examples of it was a fun story, but to go to Kyle's point, it wasn't actually a story about your mom's feistiness. It was somewhat more about Gary's feistiness at that point. Then you had this beautiful transition to kids are no better. And your daughter, how she was full of this unsolicited advice. You had a little bit of dialogue there when you said, the hell I am. I love that you talked about aging is not for sissies. And then you had a nice closing about how you were going to wanted to be feisty one day like your mom. Where I thought your content could have been stronger is, as Kyle kind of mentioned, a bit more notes about examples about how your mom is feisty. And the reason I would encourage you to focus on that is because I think that's where the real conflict is. Like, you as the sandwich generation are really trying to, you're sandwiched between a number of ways: meeting your mom needs and keeping your own independence, helping your mom be independent, and what all that means to you, seeing your daughter kind of treating you the same, or you treat, there's all that conflict between generations that I think a story could illustrate better possibly than the one you did, or at least refine the one you do. So if that's your main conflict, that you really show us. You have some great characters in your story, following Lee's advice. You've got some great settings, some great characters, but really hone in on the specific conflict you want us to pay attention to. Might benefit you the next time you tell this story. All right, and over to, now it's going to humor evaluation, which is Emmy. Welcome, Emmy.
Okay. Thank you for that fun story, Cynthia. It was that had some nice surprises in it as far as the humor was concerned. For instance, the very beginning, you had a nice surprise with the mother, the doctor wanting to see her naked, and she's 80 years old and she's with the walker and everything. You gotta get the walker out. And, you know, he just wants to see me naked. I'm with Lee on this one, where you could do the dialogue and the demonstration and really pull us into the story without that narration, because you wouldn't need the narration if you did that. So I'd like to see you get up out of your chair and act some of this out. You know, Gary headed up off on the grass without his walker after you went to all the trouble of fighting with the damn walker to get it in the car, and he goes off without it. You know, so we could see some levels of excitement or anger or frustration or whatever if you stood up and gave it to us. You know, I loved your feistiness yourself, where you did the WTF, and then you said, no way in hell. And I'm going, wait a minute, that's not WTF. And it made me laugh because I expected you to say what the WTF meant rather than go into no way in hell. So I thought that was really well done. Nice job. And then when you started talking about your kid, the Tia was her name, right? That was the other thing. You had Gary. We never heard what your mom's name was.
Mom.
Just Mom. Okay. All right. And then, so your daughter was Tia. And her rules, her roof, her rules. So I think that was another one where you could have acted it out to the benefit of the story, because you're going to say, yeah, you're going to come live with me under my roof, my rules. The hell I am. Of course, you're going to change the voice too, so that it's whatever her, you know, the difference between the two of you. So you had some really great opportunities in that story for more humor just through body language. So you get up and deliver it with that same feistiness that you have. Show us that feistiness. So well done, Cynthia. I really like your speech, and I'll be curious to hear it again if you can add some of these suggestions into it. So thank you very much, Cynthia. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Kyle, Mary, and Emmy, for your specific feedback for Cynthia on story content and humor. I think she gained some very specific suggestions, which is what this is all about. I will at the very end give some feedback on the overall evaluations and the meeting as well, but I want to move into our second speaker, who was Philip. And for Philip, we also have 3 evaluators. We have Cheryl for story, Cynthia for content, and Lee for humor. So I'll call on Cheryl first, and Cheryl, you can turn it then over to Cynthia, who will then turn it over to Lee. So Cheryl, share about the story you heard.
Thank you. Phil, I liked at first when you said your speech was horses, dogs, and cats. I was thought, what are we going to hear here? What's going to happen? And I liked how you set the scene of the whole story and how it was going to be when you said that you were 3 years old when your dad retired from the military and you moved to a farm in Minnesota. And in my head, I was picturing a farm and what it might look like. And I really thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. He's talking about horses, dogs, and cats, not cows and pigs and whatever. But your sister, you said your sister, and I believe this is probably your little sister that you were talking about. I can't remember if you said little sister or not, but that she was okay until she started talking. And that's when you started getting into the whole idea of what you were talking about with the horses, dogs, and cats. And you said, Phil, that horses are smarter. And your little sister said, no, cats are smarter. And you didn't go into the dog yet. So I thought, well, where's the dog fit in? But I knew somewhere you had dogs on your title. I knew it was going to come up. But I liked that you focused on yourself and the pony Nipper, how your dad had put the saddle on it and sat you on there. And you basically was just telling the story about your horse, your pony, and riding it along the hedge. And then your dad saying, here, Phil, take the reins. And at that time, when you said that Nipper wasn't going to go with you taking the reins and riding, and Nipper decided that he was going to help Phil off of his back and bucked him off onto the grass. And you said it was an example of horse sense. And I kind of pictured that whole story. And you were really involved in talking about Nipper and named Nipper. And I don't remember if you named, oh, yep, you did. We'll get to that. And so you kind of talked a lot more about Nipper than you did the other animals that you talked about. So when you got to the cat named Fatso, it was kind of funny. First of all, I was curious. You didn't put in the story if the cat, I don't remember you saying that the cat was fat and that's why it was called Fatso. But I really like that you talked about the cat chasing bugs, flies, spiders, anything like that that flew or moved around. And what was really interesting was you said that one of the bugs went out the window and the cat decided he was going to follow after that bug, and the cat wasn't smart enough to know not to go out the window. And that kind of was starting to tell about your story about who was smarter, that kind of thing. You're kind of getting that idea. So then you talked about your dog Fritz. Fritz was pretty neat, and he would chase you and tug sticks that you guys had. And I liked when you said you ran up the trunk of the tree that was kind of like slanted, that you could run up the trunk and get into the leaves in the tree, and the dog couldn't get to you. And so in the end, you said the smarter was the horse because it never fell out the window. And that's how you came up with the idea of who the smarter one was. I really kind of liked your story. It was kind of like a chronological by animal on what you were talking about on who was a smarter dog, who was a smarter horses, dogs, or cats. It's pretty neat story about each one of your animals and how they related to your whole family and whatever. So it was kind of neat. I liked it. And I think you could probably put a little bit more description in some places, like especially in the beginning, maybe you did talk about the hedge, but it was good. It was a good speech. I enjoyed it. Thank you, Phil. And I'll turn it over now, I think, to Cynthia.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Phil. It was a great speech. I really enjoyed it. I'm doing the content, and I liked how you got into arguments with your sister about whether cats are smarter than horses. I happen to think cats are smarter than horses, but I have a discriminatory feeling against horses because, like Nipper did to you, I've had several experiences with horses brushing me off, and I don't particularly appreciate it. So therefore, cats are smarter. They don't do that to you. I liked how you invoked some of the sense of smell, the smelling the grass, like Lee talked to us about in our in his speech today. And you had good organization. It was very effective. Although I was a little confused about the dog because it really was more between the horse and the cat. And then we got a dog story and it didn't tie in, other than you both agreed that you liked the dog. And so I was wondering if he turned out to be the smartest one of all, actually, because he saved you from your brother, the tickler. So, but I found that Fritz was not quite as connected to the other stories. And so you might want to do something to tie him in a little bit more. A little more description on your sister too. You know, you said she talked a lot and you'd get into arguments, but I wasn't sure. Was she on the horse with you? No, she was not. And how did Nipper ever push her off? I was curious. So, content wise, good organization, but a little. I want more dog story. I guess that's just it. Thank you.
All right, Phil, I will go ahead and do the humor part of your speech. And there is a lot of opportunity to do humor. You can do things like puns and twists. And for here, because you're kind of being very descriptive, maybe you could put a lot more similes in there, like living on the farm in Minnesota was like Little House on the Prairie, and bring us back to those type of memories. And then I would switch the stories around. I would do the cat story first, and then your story, because cat's going to be the not as smart. Then we have the smarter story. And then lastly, we had the dog, which is even smarter. So there was a great dialogue that you did after your speech ended. And that was when you said, and when all we heard was the cat go, meow, that should have been in your story. We heard a thud, and then we heard, meow, as if the cat was crying out in pain. Well, let's talk about my smart animal, Nipper the horse, and tell the whole story about Nipper. And then you get into, so Fatso the catso was not so smart. Nipper the flipper knows how to eject his rider, because there is no greater satisfaction for a horse than to be eating its oats. But wait, there's more. Enters Fritz the dog. When my older brother Bruce comes to visit us on the farm, he likes to tickle Phil. We were having the tickle game, and I ran up the leaning tree to escape to sanctuary because my brother is out of shape and can't climb trees. And I said to him, you might want to eat a salad now and again. Sis, I believe you now know that horses are smarter than cats, but dogs are smarter than horses because they are human-like in their thinking. Dogs are the original AI. Fritz decided the game was over. And the moral of this story is Fritz has the most wits. And then you can use a little bit of rhyming and simile and playing off of each other. And, you got to get back at your brother for tickling you. Fatso, go eat some salad. You can't climb a tree. Okay, but I loved all the stories, Phil. A little more working, and I think they can become even funnier. And I will turn it back to our general evaluator, Karen.
Thank you very much, Lee. And thank you also to Cynthia and Cheryl for your feedback for Phil. We appreciate that. I also want to make the comment that I'm seeing some feedback in the chat, which I do encourage you to do. If you haven't had an opportunity to speak up and want to, there are some comments on the that you can add in, and I encourage that. There was also a question here from Todd. Is there a handout about what you're looking for in the 3 different parts of an evaluation, or is it hit or miss depending on the skill? Great question. We are evolving this as we go, because we're learning about each of these components, where each session that we do builds on the previous ones. So I think that this is a great idea to actually have a handout. We don't currently have one. It's the first time we've done it this way, but I love that suggestion, and we will take it back to, looks like Emmy's already challenging herself to create a form. So I love that. That's part of what I like about this group, but especially for someone coming in thinking, gosh, what are they looking for in the evaluation? Because we learn from the evaluations too. So thank you for that suggestion, Todd, and we will try to incorporate that as we move forward. Now for the third speaker, our third speaker was Mary. And for Mary, she will have 3 evaluators as well. I will speak to the story, and Phil will speak to the content, and Kyle to the humor. So I will begin by telling you, Mary, that I loved your setup for your story for several reasons. One, you gave a great intro. So you put me in the scene before I began, and then you began right away with your heart pounding, so I was there with you. And of course, the title pulled me in as well, because I get lost all the time. I'm a kindred spirit. What can I say? So it was very powerful for me right up front. And I thank you for that. And pulling on some of the things we learned from Lee today, having a good story requires that you have a setting, that we can picture the setting, that we have specific characters, and that we have a conflict. And is there some kind of a lesson in the end there? So you had, from what I heard, 2 sort of distinct stories with a similar learning message at the end. Your first setting or your first scene was in the mall and getting lost, losing your car in the wrong parking mall. And the second scene was more going on a hike and not being sure where you were on the hike. So those 2 settings to me were very clear, and you did use some illustrations, some interactions to help us with that. And you also touched on some of the senses to draw us into the scenes as well. And those I thought were very powerful. You had clear characters in the first one, you and the security folks. And in the second one, you had a couple of different groups of people that were also hiking and trying to make that connection. So you did a good job of taking us on the story with your characters. Now, if I were going to suggest a way to take it one step further, it would be to help us with bringing in your lesson by using the senses. And the reason I say that is because the message you have is that you don't want to get lost in the craziness of being lost, so you lose out on the present, being in the present. So if you can expand on your senses, let me smell that what's out there, let me hear what's out there, let me pull me in so that I'm like, and then you can fall back on how you can lose out on that if you are getting lost. So I love your stories. I think they're both good. And if you just tweak it with pulling us into them a little bit further, I think that would draw me in even more. So I loved that, Mary. Thank you. I followed very well because I could identify. And next, I will turn it over to Phil to speak to the content.
Thank you very much, Madam General Evaluator Karen. Mary, on the content and the effectiveness, I'm going to focus mostly on how the story flowed in your stories flowed in my mind, and what they led me to, the conclusions that your stories led me to. I did appreciate that you had a point at the end of your story, and it was very clear, don't get lost in the being lost, enjoy the journey, kind of is what I took away from it. Enjoy the journey, embrace the experience. I would love to have like a hint of that at the beginning to somehow clue me in on this is where it's going. I'm gonna hit you with the full punch at the end, but give me something, a little taste that might lead me to start thinking what you're going to tell me. You had 2 main stories, as Karen mentioned. Both were humorous. Both gave me a chuckle. What I didn't quite get is where were we going with the first story, and how did it relate to the second story other than being disoriented? I think there might be an opportunity in that to maybe have those little. I heard Lee talking about mini stories this when I finally was able to join everybody, but that a couple of mini stories to highlight that you are getting lost but enjoying the journey. I lost my car, but I made a friend. I got in the wrong parking lot, but I learned my favorite color is orange, or something. And then have the big story about the self-guided tour that really brings that point home, that you were in the middle of all this beauty and quiet, sloshing through the creek, climbing the hill, out of breath, meeting new friends, even though they thought you were stalking them. All these opportunities to really bring that point home, and then at the end you can actually tie it together with this is the lesson I've learned, I share with you tonight kind of idea. But lots of fun. I think there's opportunities, as Karen mentioned, to really grab our senses with the creek and the flowers and the balmy weather, maybe, and all these ideas that might help embrace the joy of the journey and not getting the angst of being lost. Madam General Evaluator.
Thank you very much, and I will call on Kyle to touch on the humor.
Thank you, Karen. Mary, I agree with a lot of what Phil said. You had the two stories, and while they both made the point that you tend to have a poor sense of direction, I don't think the first story, it's cute, but it doesn't have as much opportunity for humor as the second. So I'm going to focus completely on the second story. And if you were going to give this again, I would suggest dropping the first and just staying with the second. Your intro had some wordplay in it, setting up for the humor. I like that. I would encourage you to continue to look for opportunities for humor. I also liked what Karen said about using your senses to kind of carry you through, because there could be the smell of the bus, and then the wonder and the color and the smell of the flowers, and then the cold, dark oppression of the forest, the woods that you're lost in, and so forth. So there's opportunities there. Now, the primary humor here, I think, there's two ways to do this. First of all, you are on a roller coaster ride emotionally. And I think you need to show us that roller coaster ride. And the transitions can be very quick. So you're going to need to emote it in your face and hands, and also in your words. Now, let me walk you through the emotions that I see. There's the frustration with the driver blah, blah, blahing at you because you want to get out and see the flowers. There's the worry that you tend to get lost. But you have a clever strategy. You're going to follow people. And then there's a growing frustration as the strategy starts to fail, as people peel off. And now you're following this couple, and you need to tell us why they think you're a stalker. I mean, if like they're a young couple being romantic and whatnot, and they're being followed around by this person. Yeah, you need to give us more detail there so we can, and let us feel your frustration as you realize, I'm going to have to leave them. I'm going to have to give up my strategy. And then have a few moments of being lost in the wonder of the garden before you realize you are lost in the garden. Now, so you realize you're lost in the garden. Then you have the thundering heart, the sign that there may be dangerous animals, the fear. Now you're like an explorer in the jungle trying to find your way out. And I was actually thinking about that, comparing yourself to Indiana Jones in one of the movies, or Richard Burton, who went looking for Dr. Livingstone, hacking through the jungles. So you have the when you finally think you may have seen civilization, there's the hope. Look, that might be a bus stop. There's hope. And then you plunge through the brook and you reach there, and now you are triumphant. You are like Hillary on the top of Everest. You have found the bus stop. It's a humorous juxtaposition there of those two things. And then the triumph is soiled slightly by the fact that you're standing there in muddy, wet clothing, and you're 45 minutes early. And you can choose to extract the message, or you could say, "Hey, look, there's some people going off into the garden. I think I'll follow them." You could end with that. You haven't learned a thing. But the roller coaster ride emotionally is where I think most of the humor lies. There's one other technique you could do. If you remember my sauna speech from a few months ago, you could do the internal dialogue. You're talking to yourself. That would be a very different development of the speech while you argue with yourself as you go through these various stages. So those are my suggestions for humor. I think it has a lot of potential. I'd love to hear it again. And I'm going to hand it back to our general evaluator, Karen McNamara.
Thank you, Kyle and Phil, for your feedback. For Mary, we all appreciate the details that you've each provided. At this point on the agenda, it has us looking at the observations that the whole group had with regard to grammar and any tracks where things were particularly powerful in the way of grammar, or if there were things that maybe hit you the wrong way. So I'm just going to open it up for 2 minutes to see if anyone has any feedback on our grammar, and then I will close out with some comments and call on the timer. All right, so let me open it up right now for feedback on the grammar. Looks like Lee has a comment.
I'm going to fix some grammar in Cynthia's speech. WTF is Whiskey Tango Foxtrot.
I wanted to comment on the fact that Lee, hopefully as experienced Toastmasters, we're not being introduced to the concepts he was giving us like illusion for the first time, but he spent time introducing the word and explaining it and telling, and then sharing it in a story and so forth. And I appreciated that because it's useful to be reminded of some of these techniques. Sometimes we use them automatically without naming them. And it's good to name them, and it's good to think about using them purposefully.
Other things people particularly liked or had questions or comments on? Mary.
Well, I just a shout out to Lee too. You made your point so cleanly and clearly, the story itself, and then the opening, but then how you made the points that you were making in the story was so clean and so clear. I actually rewrote my opening before I gave it. It was that helpful.
Wow, awesome.
I really enjoyed Lee's speech too. I wish I had it before I started writing my speech, but it was like, oh no, I have to follow that.
We're all learning together. That's the power of it.
One of the things that I appreciated, because I had heard this from Lee before, but I forgot about it, which was writing the purpose of each line of his speech out in the margin so that he could go back when he needed to rip and tear out stuff, and see, look for the things that didn't really support his speech as much as other things. So that I appreciated that, Lee. Thank you.
All right. Was that you saying there were time there, Kyle, or?
No, that was me. That's applause.
Okay. Okay. I wasn't sure. All right. Any last comments before I make a few comments about the whole meeting and call on our timer?
A comment for Phil. I loved that she never stopped talking. Once she started talking, she never stopped talking.
Yeah, I like that too.
And you could do some humor there, Phil. Don't you know people that talk the most are the people that really don't know anything?
I also thought there was an opportunity there for with the cat when he fell out the window was, I wonder which one of his 9 lives that was.
That's a good one.
That's a good, yeah. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah,
Or you can spin it another way, Phil, and just go, I think he's now down to only 2 more lives, right?
Yeah.
So it's the allusion to the 9 lives, right? Makes us think.
yeah, yeah.
So Phil, the purpose of your speech was supposed to be body language.
I clicked on the wrong thing, so actually, so
Thank you for telling me that because I sure didn't see any body language.
yeah, I was rushing to get that in there, and I just clicked on. I didn't click correctly. I'm completely off.
That's funny.
What was it supposed to be?
Well, I have the pathway to humor, and I didn't collapse all the. Anyway, I just was rushing through. I'm going to correct that now.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your feedback on specifics around grammar and word usage and ideas of pulling in humor. I appreciate that. I want to give a few comments about the meeting as a whole, and then I'll give a few specifics on to some of the evaluators so they get feedback too. I loved the format of the day in that we had the education, the speaking, and then the evaluation. I think that's a very powerful way to pull it together. Lee, I particularly enjoyed your educational session from several perspectives. One, it was very clear, which is important. 2, I liked the way you started out with a story right away, and that story validated and demonstrated the points you were making. My very favorite part of your training or your educational session was your final line about getting out of your comfort zone. To me, that immediately clicked and brought me into a thinking mode of, oh, wow, it wasn't just getting outside and enjoying it, it was out of my comfort zone. And that's what we're here about. So to me, that was very, very powerful. And then the tools that you gave us about the setting, the conflict, the characters, and pulling in the illusions and the senses and all of those things were very helpful. And what was exciting to see is that even though we got the lessons today, many of those things were incorporated in the speeches today and were also highlighted in the evaluations. So that's showing that we are learning as we go and we're building our stories and we're building our confidence. So I thank you for your time with us on that, Lee. The only comment that I would make regarding helping me in that session was there were a few points when it was hard to hear you. When you changed your voice to a real high-pitched one, I didn't have a clue what words came out of your mouth. And there were a couple times when your voice got really soft and I couldn't hear. But otherwise, it was very clear. The story was clear. The lesson was clear. And I thank you for that. I appreciate that we got everybody involved tonight and that we had evaluations from so many of us here. To me, the overarching win of the evaluations was that everyone gave very specific feedback on things the individuals could do to make the stories stronger, either in humor or content or in structure. So I think that was the most powerful thing about our evaluations. I think that everybody gave at least 1 or 2 specific suggestions, and many of you gave actual examples for that. Gave twists or similes or examples or showed the gestures, gave the words, those kinds of things. To me, that's what really helps is when you get the feedback on how to take it to the next level. So nicely done for everyone. And now I'm going to call on our timer to tell us how we did individually. You're muted.
Thank you, Madam General Evaluator. It's been a crazy night for me, playing multiple roles. Okay. Phil was 14 minutes and 17 seconds. I'm sorry, I said Phil. Lee was 14 minutes and 17 seconds. Sorry, Phil. Speaker one, Cynthia, was 5 minutes and 36 seconds. Phil was 6 minutes and 31 seconds. Mary Morrison was 6 minutes and 49 seconds. For the evaluations, my story evaluation for Cynthia was 3 minutes and 19. Mary Morrison's evaluation of Cynthia was 2 minutes and 47. Emmy's was 3 minutes and 6 seconds. Cheryl Marks's evaluation of Phil was 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Cynthia was 2 minutes and 13, and Lee's was 2:20. Karen McNamara's story evaluation of Mary Morrison was 2:41. Phil's I failed to capture completely, and I also failed to capture my own. I think I went overtime, and I apologize for that. And Karen's general evaluation was 2 minutes and 53 seconds.
Thank you. And at this point, I will turn it back to our Toastmaster for the evening, Emmy.
Oh, right. Thank you. I've just realized that my chair has been squeaking. Can you hear the squeaking? Oh, good. Oh, good. All right. I thought this was a wonderful meeting. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed hearing everybody's contributions. What I would like to do now is talk a little bit to our guests, see what they think, what they thought of the meeting. We have two guests. We have Todd. Todd, do you have any comments you'd like to make on the meeting itself?
Madam Ranking Officer, fellow Toastmasters and friends. It's been a long time since I've gone to a meeting and not had to do anything and just be a sponge. So it was great just to sit here and see educational pieces that expanded my learning and to validate where I think other clubs should go to stretch and become better evaluators, because often when you say the same old all the time, that's all you hear and all that is repeated. But it's when you come to an advanced club that actually walks the talk and does it proficiently, it's a pleasant surprise. I've been to a couple of storytelling clubs or groups that think that they're storytelling clubs, and sometimes I'm walking away going, I'm more confused than when I walked in. So in this particular case, it was really nice to see Lee's presentation, followed by application, followed by evaluation involving those learnings. So yes, it's almost like information and sensory overload. But yes, I did enjoy being a fly on the wall and not having to do very much. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I was so glad you were here. And, anytime you want to come as a guest evaluator or something, we'd love to have you.
I'm sure I could probably step up to the plate. I was talking with Kyle earlier. We were on a evaluation panel a couple months back, and now they want me to do another keynote presentation on evaluations at a club. Because if you go on YouTube and you type in my name, you'll see Todd's secret sauce to evaluation. After we win in District 61, anytime you win one of the competitions, we do all the competitions in English and French, you're invited back to create a webinar or a workshop that teaches others how to get better and to have more people who play in the sandbox. So once I won the district evaluation one, they asked me to do the evaluation one. And then when I won the district table topic, they asked me to come back and talk about how Todd wins a table topic. So there are a couple of different videos out there in the internet world. So yes, I would be more than honored to come back at some point and stretch my evaluation skills with your club.
All right. Okay, Kayla, do you have any comments about your experience tonight? Kayla, are you there? Let's see if no.
Maybe
Got
it's your
it. I
AI
was having
quality.
difficulty getting it to unmute.
There, we got it.
Yeah, it wasn't what I expected, but I had a good time.
All right.
I thought it would be funnier.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
Maybe next time.
Yeah,
We're
it's
working
great.
on that.
Thanks.
All right.
Now, how do I mute myself?
I'm glad you
All
were.
right.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the homework that we did for this time, which was, well, I'm going to let Kyle talk to us about the homework because
Thank you.
We're going to.
So the goal for you doing the homework in this last month was so that you'll have something to work with to get ready for next month. So next month, our meeting is on Saturday, the 11th, not Thursday night, Saturday morning, the 11th. And we're meeting in person in Silverdale. We will, for those of you who can't attend in person, we will have Zoom capability. So you'll be able to connect. But for those of you who can make it, we hope you'll come over to Silverdale and participate. And we're going to be inviting Toastmasters from the local clubs and area to come in and be a live audience for us. We're hoping we'll get 15, 20 people. So we have a large audience, not large, a live audience to practice in front of. Because that's a very different experience, trying to do storytelling and humor with an audience 5 feet in front of you. So your homework assignment, I'm going to set up the event. I'm not the event. I will set up an Eventbrite. I will also set up the Free Toast for November 11th. It exists, but it's not formatted right. So don't go and sign up for stuff yet. We will have probably 5 or 6 speaking slots, and then a lot of evaluation slots, just like today. We're not doing a teaching slot. We're just doing practice and evaluate, practice and evaluate, practice and evaluate. So what your homework assignment is, unless you have a story you're really attached to and you want to work on it, select one of the stories from this month's homework. And prepare a 4 to 6, 5 to 7, preferably 4 to 6, but 5 to 7 is allowable, speech to practice and sign up to practice for the 11th. Now, some things I would recommend you do as you're thinking about that story. Identify the setting. What are the scenes in the story? What's the conflict in the story? Who are the characters in the story? Can you identify the things that are impacting your 5 senses in the story? And was there a lesson learned? Was there a moral that comes out of it? Now, none of that has to do with humor. Hopefully you can think about adding some humor in there as well. We'll be developing our humor skills as we go. But from last month, you may remember, look for an opportunity to juxtapose 2 things. Like I mentioned, Mary Morrison, Hillary climbing Everest, Mary finding the bus stop. Juxtaposing 2 things can create humor. So that's your homework assignment. Do I have any questions?